Hello to everyone in our patient community. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Inside the Industry. Today we are joined by Delegate David Moon of District 20, Montgomery County. He's a very, very busy guy who's done an immense amount, not only for Montgomery County, but who has ceaseless work in terms of advocacy, working as a policy attorney, advocacy consultant for progressive organizations. So we really appreciate Delegate Moon taking the time today, sharing your thoughts about Question 4 and what it means for our patient community. And just to give some background to those who might not be familiar, Question 4 would amend the Maryland Constitution to add a new article which would authorize individuals 21 years of age or older to use and possess cannabis. And that added section also authorizes the Maryland General Assembly to provide the use, distribution, possession, regulation, and taxation of cannabis within the state. So during the 2022 legislative session, the state legislature also passed the implementing legislation that would take effect once the amendment is adopted. Polling indicates that Maryland residents support legalization by maybe a nearly 2-to-1 margin, with majority support among Democrats, Republicans, and independents. That ballot just requires a simple majority to become law. One of the things that we want to ensure that we're doing on our end is educating our patient community, showing what the impact of Question 4 could really be, and just how far reaching the implications are, the positive implications are. That being said, again, thank you, Delegate David Moon, for joining us today, and also Warren Lemley, who's the president of Peake Relief. We're going to kick this conversation off by just passing it over to Warren and getting it going from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. And once again, thank you, Delegate Moon, for being with us here today. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for quite a few years now. Obviously, we have been intimately involved in legislation concerning cannabis, from everything from the medical program to adult use. And I've had the pleasure of working with you on some of these parts of legislation in the past. So once again, I just want to give you my appreciation for being committed to changing our cannabis laws here in the state of Maryland, trying to correct some of the past mistakes that we may have made with criminal justice, and having some great reforms that are going to really affect a lot of the state of Maryland and primarily, and most importantly, communities of color. Once again, I appreciate you being here. And I just want to start off with, why is it so important for the people of Maryland, our patients, to be able to go out and vote yes on Question 4? And, why now?
Well, Question 4 is a long time coming. And just so we're clear on the voter education here, a vote for Question 4 is to amend the state constitution for legalization. So for those who care about this, we're really trying to get the word out that it's a vote for Question 4 on the Maryland ballot this November. So why now? Well, look, Question 4 primarily is about criminal penalties. And while it says it's about cannabis legalization, the specific policy questions it's really asking is, should Maryland residents be arrested, go to jail, and subjected to criminal records for personal use of cannabis? That's the real question that's on the ballot. It's about jail time, arrests, and criminal records. So again, if you do not believe that Maryland residents should get arrested, go to jail, and face criminal records for use of small amounts of cannabis, you ought to vote for Question 4. To your question, Warren, why now? Well, for decades now, we've known that cannabis enforcement in Maryland is completely lopsided. It varies greatly by county to county, and it varies greatly by race. The only consistent thing I can say is that if you're a Black resident of Maryland, you are many times more likely to be arrested for cannabis than white residents, no matter what part of the state you're in. In 2013 or so, the ACLU did a statewide survey of data. And in Montgomery County, where I live, you were 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana if you were Black than white. In Baltimore, it was over 5 times more likely. And that pattern held basically everywhere you were in the state. A few years later, the legislature decriminalized small amounts of marijuana, 10 grams. It's not legal. You can get a ticket up to $100. And if you have too much, you can still go to jail. So you would think this would solve the problem. No, the police were breaking out scales on people. They're still pulling people over, still arresting them. Possession with intent to distribute, still an offense. And so lots of people still getting arrested and going to jail. Thousands after decriminalization. And guess who they were? Once again, it was disproportionately still Black residents. So we have not solved this problem. And all the data has shown, actually, that nationally, white Americans are the most likely to smoke marijuana. It's fairly even among various groups, but actually white residents have the slight edge, but they do not have the edge in arrests and incarceration. So I think for me, and everyone's going to have a different reason for doing this, but for me, the reason to vote for question 4 is to undo this hugely inequitable use of criminal penalties on a nonviolent offense that we know everybody's doing, and that in fact white residents are doing the most, but seem to be getting away with more than anyone else. That's the reality of it. In Maryland, 50% of people like in the nation likely have used marijuana. That's what all the survey data says. And that means that most of them got away with a jailable offense, but not many black residents. So that's where we are. And that's what question 4 for me is about. It's unraveling these ridiculously lopsided criminal penalties.
Well, I really appreciate you kind of spelling it out. And I think that's where it starts for us as well. I mean, the effect that having a criminal record can have on your life, from the amount that you might make, the occupations that you can hold, the universities or colleges that you can attend, and even housing can really come into question with some of these different criminal records that you might attain through basically the illegality of cannabis and marijuana. I think that's where it starts. And I think that providing people the ability to go out and get safe forms of cannabis is definitely something that is going to be beneficial as well. But I think first and foremost, we need to solve these inequities and really reset the criminal justice program. I'm really excited that the state of Maryland is finally taking this step. I'm glad that we can finally put it in front of the voters and hopefully get a really great turnout and send a message that, hey, this is a problem in our state. We see that it's an issue, and now we're going to take the time to correct it. Obviously, you went into what kind of effects it's going to have on the criminal justice system here in Maryland. I know there's been a lot of discussion. We talked about criminal records, about expungements and, previous criminal records and how it might affect people who have previously had, a marijuana charge on the record for the past, and, what that might look like going forward.
Great. Yeah. So question 4, again, a vote for question 4 on its face is pretty simple. It's asking you whether we ought to legalize personal use of cannabis by people 21 plus, but it unlocks another law that we passed, which is to say that if voters say yes to question 4, a whole separate law with actual details begins to go into effect. So what are these details? Again, they are primarily about the criminal law. All of this business about licensing and retail sales and stuff like that is a big to be decided this January and beyond. But the things that we settled now that would go into effect immediately after July 2023 is legalization of personal use amounts, home grow of up to 2 plants, and we would have a few other related reforms, like we would automatically expunge the records of people with past convictions for possession and arrests. And we would allow people who were incarcerated at the time for a simple possession to apply for resentencing. So again, let me be very clear again, just so we understand what's going on here. The post-legalization world in Maryland, again, if voters say yes, would mean that after July 2023, so there's a little bit of a delay to let us get set up and train everybody. So July 2023, personal use, not sales, personal use primarily becomes legalized. Growing for your own use, possessing for your own use, using small amounts of cannabis, all of this stuff, the criminal penalties mostly go away. You're going to start to get into trouble if you have large quantities or if you're distributing without a license. So again, we are not at this point legalizing anything having to do with sales and distribution. The state has chosen not to go lenient, people essentially dealing marijuana in the post-legalization world, but all of your personal use types of activities go legal. So that's the system that's being set up. Again, you'd be able to apply to have your jail time reduced if you were incarcerated for simple possession. If it had already happened and it's a past arrest, charge, conviction, it would be automatically expunged for you. Now, if you had possession with intent to distribute or some other offense like that, you would be able to apply for expungement 3 years after your offense. So that's the basic criminal justice setup that goes into effect. And we'll, of course, be working on some of this in the coming years to try and do additional reforms. I've certainly got a few cooking that I think will make sense in the post-legalization world.
Well, I was really happy to see this actually made it into the bill last year, because I know in previous years there's been a lot of discussion about expungement and automatic expungement and the challenges that go with it. And it seemed to be one of the first items that were removed from a lot of the previous adult use bills. Obviously, the systems don't necessarily communicate to each other. I heard that it was going to be incredibly expensive. So the fact that we already managed to get that in part of the bill, I think was a really big win for the General Assembly, win for the people of Maryland. I was just really excited to see that make it into the bill last year. We receive a lot of questions concerning adult use and what that might look like. And you touched on it. There's a lot of expectations for people who don't really get into the meat of the bill and really have an intimate understanding of it, of when they're going to be able to go to a store and actually have it available to them. This even happened across the river in Virginia when they passed adult use. People expected the ability to go out to a store and be able to purchase it, and they still don't have that ability. You mentioned obviously everything kind of comes into play July 2023. I know that you don't have a magic 8-ball to give you the answer here, but what are the possible scenarios that you think of that will be like the timelines for when, as you mentioned, they have to go through the regulating, the licensing, and things of that nature? What are the couple of different scenarios that you see with it being available to the people in Maryland?
Well, yeah, this is an interesting question. So let's say voters legalize marijuana and it goes into effect July 2023. Where the heck do they get it? So for the time being, the law would set up a demand that the legislature create this system. And in the interim, while we figure out what that's going to look like, you'd have a few options. You could grow it, you could get it shared from someone who legally possessed it. You'd still be obviously able to go through the medical system and get a dispensary card to let you purchase through there. And you would have out of state purchases that were made in places, again, where you can legally get your own cannabis. So that puts a little bit of a squeeze on us to not allow a more robust black or gray market to emerge in those months if we really want to keep people in the system where their cannabis is tested and regulated for safety. And that's another aspect of this that I think will hopefully come into play once we move to a licensed system. That's what we have under the medical system. So what does that mean? Well, I think ultimately we are going to move to a dispensary licensing system. It will be larger than what we have in the current medical system. But as to that, we're going to have to do it with equity in mind. That's one of the key, I think, principles and lessons that we learned coming out of the medical system, was that you had to build that in up front. So we want to be a little careful about how we roll this out, make sure we're going to survive lawsuits. We had medical dispensary lawsuits coming at us from the last round of licenses that we issued, and that process needs to play out. That being said, again, I don't think we want to dilly-dally too long here for many reasons. Out-of-state competition, again, emergence of a black market if we have legal marijuana, but we haven't yet opened the licensed channels to purchase it. So I'd like to say I don't make predictions on this sort of thing, but my personal goal is that we open before Virginia. And I'd like to beat Virginia to actually opening, and to say we didn't just rush to it, but we did it right. We got equity done. We got a system that maximizes revenue, minimizes the illegal black market, and creates business development opportunities in every county of the state. And I think we can get that done and still beat Virginia to opening. So a year, a couple years, but a lot of this depends on how much we use the existing licensees versus trying to come up with something entirely new. And that's a lot of the question you're going to see dealt with in the January legislative session.
Very good. I know that there have been some meetings, legislators have been meeting throughout the summer. I was just curious. I've had the opportunity to speak with some of the legislators that have been involved with some of the different work groups. I know that there's been some discussion of trying to have something prepared, or at least a little bit ready early in the session. Is there any updates on, where some of that information might be? Are we looking like, if there's any preparations beforehand, or is it something that we're going to see worked out basically the beginning of the session, kind of moving through at a normal pace, I would say?
There are definitely conversations beginning to happen about how to get some sort of consensus together on this. So I think you're going to see things move more quickly than you may have seen in the summer. I think in the summer you saw we were still grappling with having put forward the criminal justice reforms on cannabis. The amendment and campaign for question 4 is coming together. And then beyond that, there were, at least on the House side, there were some interim meetings to look at getting the public health, grounding the public health impacts and data collection up front, and some early conversations about licensing and the like. And so I think now you're going to see both the House and the Senate start to try and move this conversation together in the interim. So hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit closer as we head into session. But yeah, there are conversations happening now, and I think you're going to see the chamber start to swim in the same direction as we get to January.
Well, like I said, it's really exciting to hear that there's this movement and this just a general consensus that it looks like this is the path forward. Honestly, to your point there, just even getting this discussed early in session, I think is going to be a huge step in the right direction. I feel like in previous years, it's one of those issues that people kind of push to the back of the line and then are forced to deal with it because it's a hard topic. We have states that are not in line with federal laws and different situations like that. So I do understand the hesitancy, but I'm just really excited to see us finally taking this big step forward. I think it's going to be a big improvement for the people of Maryland. And obviously, I look forward to working with you in the upcoming session. I guess the one thing I would leave you with is, one of the reasons we're having this is just trying to educate our patients, as mentioned, and encourage people to get out to vote. So is there any other statements that you'd like to make to kind of get that out to the people of Maryland?
Yeah, Tuesday, November 8th, please get out and vote for question 4. This is the Maryland cannabis legalization question. I've seen these polls that say, oh, it's going to win. Everyone's like, oh, 60%. Well, I don't know about that. It can't just be 60% of the registered voters or the public. It's got to be a 50% majority of the people who actually show up to vote. In Maryland, we've done everything we can to make this as easy as possible for you. If you show up at an early voting center a week before the election in the county you live in, and there are many early voting centers now, you can register to vote there and then cast your ballot. So you don't even have to be registered in advance. You can register to vote on election day now at your neighborhood polling location in Maryland. So even if you messed that part up and you forgot and you remember suddenly, oh crap, it's Tuesday, November 8th, I got to get out and vote for question 4. Don't let the voter registration be a barrier. We have same-day voter registration, and please don't take this for granted. There's a lot of other stuff on the ballot, so hopefully you'll check out the governor's race and what have you. But cannabis legalization, long time coming, decades in the works. Question 4, vote for it on Tuesday, November 8th.
Well, thank you so much for joining with us today, and I appreciate the work you've done in the past, and I continue to see the work that you're going to do in the future. Once again, I look forward to working with you this upcoming session, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.